Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song you'd like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's comes at us from DJ Project. However, I don't have a caption to post here with information about the track because it actually happened through some private messages, and it's just kind of scattered, a little bit of conversation, a little bit of information about the works. So we're just going to go and dive straight into the track here. Our artist is Kirayoshi, and the track is called The Night. See what they're bringing to the table. Alright, so we had a train, and a very lo-fi drum. Strong, like indie rock vibe to it with a little bit of extra atmosphere though. Really great use of atmospheric environmental sounds. It almost feels like somebody getting off of a train and or a subway maybe even, I don't know, and either setting up being a musician just on the side of the sidewalk, or coming across this musician, just a very simplified instrument set, and recorded it on like a tape recorder, kind of getting this lo-fi vibe. You're getting all the atmosphere of the area around it, the cars driving by. There's a real strong melancholy to this as well, and a lot of these choice notes coming outside the key and adding in that little extra spice. shifted into major there for just a hint. Almost like there's some hopefulness being tossed in here. Interesting combination of sound. There's wind, rain was kind of coming in and out. We had like tires on asphalt. Footsteps now, sounds like. Kind of sounds like something dripping as well. I love how the bugs immediately kind of push an idea.
Pourquoi je n'arrive pas à me ressaisir?
It kind of pushes for darkness. To me, it also kind of feels swampy, but I think that's just because I'm used to being around
Pourquoi
swamps.
ces émotions m'enferment-elles tant?
Je ne t'aime pas. En plus, personne ne t'aime.
Interesting choice to shift the language.
Qui se fout de ce que tu penses?
Suis-je un gagnant ou un perdant? Ou suis-je rien de tout cela?
Qui se suicide ceux que tu aimes?
Quelle est cette valeur que j'aurai? Ou non?
Tu n'es qu'un bigot nul qui mérite d'être seul.
Cela dépend-il de quelqu'un d'autre?
Et si tu es tout seul, tu feras aussi bien d'être mort.
Est-ce que j'échappe vraiment à tout ce que je rencontre?
T'es vachement pudibond.
Suis-je destiné à être seul?
Tu ne peux rien faire comme il faut?
Si je devais rester seul, pourrais-je au moins trouver la paix?
Tu n'es pas digne d'être embauché comme concierge.
Si je suis destiné à vivre avec mon âme sœur, serait-il possible de la trouver?
Même simuler l'orgasme pour toi ne vaut pas la peine. C'est parce que c'est un con.
Et si celle qui m'est destinée ne pouvait exister avant que notre rencontre soit possible?
Ce qui compte, c'est que tu es un tel loser.
Et cela pourrait-il être de véritable amour?
Tu ne peux même pas te rien.
Serais-je toujours le sujet d'un faux amour et d'un véritable mépris?
Tu es un putain de virus mortel.
It's a very unique choice to spend such a vast amount of this song's runtime not playing music. I really admire that, even if I don't think it's exactly working for me in particular. It could just be the mindset I'm in right now, but I am kind of waiting for the track to move on. Maybe if I understood the language, I might be a bit more invested.
T'es tout de même incapable d'être aimé.
Est-ce que, même pour un moment, je peux ressentir de l'amour?
L'amour, c'est pour les gens en interne. Toi, c'est loin de là.
Après tout le monde n'aimerait-il pas
The voices are getting larger, aren't they? More reverb.
L'amour existe. Mais toi, tu n'existes pas.
I noticed the female vocal is... it was starting to clip there in the last two sections. Alright, so movement 3, give or take right here. And we brought in a vibraphone, maybe? You know, it might be a piano. I'm really looking at that initial hit, the attack. And I think it is a piano or a synthesizer of sorts. But initially I was thinking like a vibraphone with yarn mallets, kind of soften it up. Yeah. Now see, that does sound like possibly a xylophone, so... And that sounds like chimes. I wonder if this is completely built off of these really neat pitch percussion instruments. And I love how we still have this underlying idea and everything else is starting to dance around it. Almost like, as in the picture on the album art, the sun, or sorry, the moon and all of these stars around it. Static though. Point out right here as well, there's really excellent production right here. Not just the placement of all these instruments or the use of the atmospheric stuff, but also each individual instrument's color. The way that they're presented, the type of reverb they have, the softness to their attacks or harshness to their attacks, all that stuff. So through the static, we have a sort of channel surfing vibe, almost like radio channel surfing. Kind of turning the dial, and you get a lot of static. When you get close to a channel, you kind of say, "Oh, that's not what I want." You keep tuning it some more. going on here? Our stars are starting to fade out. I like how that dissonance and warble it resolved into this very harmonious chord. Kind of remind, it kind of reminds me of the old THX thing.
Behold the lady of the moonlight. All hail the queen of the night sky sun. I illuminate the velvet firmament, and amongst the many stars I'm the only one. I see your hearts beat in shadow for too long, and an ocean of sorrow in your eyes.
Yeah, dipped into that minor a little bit. I think it was a minor, and then brought it back to this positive resolution.
Beckoning you to my chamber, eclipsed by the skies.
Interesting too. We get the initial hit of the piano, and the other instruments kind of sweep into it. Interesting too, we've shifted from what sounded like brass and piano and strings to this sort of spacey kind of synth. It's really hard to get a it's really hard to get the pulse here, the time signature, even the tempo. It almost feels like free time at moments. There is a type of transcendental beauty about this outro, though. I noticed that compared to our last movement, we don't have that sort of sorrowful second chord anymore. Every chord here leads to a sort of positivity. There is a raw beauty or a blissfulness in here that wasn't present in our last section. Just gonna fade out. We still have the bugs going on. All right. So that was The Night. Interesting track. So it's split into four movements, and I kind of want to talk about them as individual aspects of the song, but on the other side of the equation, there's also so little musical components to each one individually. They're all very atmospheric in a lot of cases. So I'm also going to want to talk about the song as a whole. I have no idea how long this is going to be, being that we're already 24 minutes into this video. I'm going to wager it's going to be a long one, though. So I think that's what we're going to look at each movement individually. And then I want to look at production and atmosphere / storytelling, novelty of environmental sounds, and then lyrics. I hope I can remember all that. We're probably looking at another half hour of conversation here, probably before we even hit the lyrics. And then I have to hope that we find the lyrics, because while this is... Wait, what did it... Oh, nice. I actually have the lyrics right here in front of me. Awesome. So, we'll get into that in a second then. Alright, so going in order. Movement 1. We start off with the train, and then like some car noises, and then a very lo-fi, simple drum idea. Just bass kick and snare, and I think a hi-hat, closed hi-hat. And that's it. Very pared down drum kit. Very simple ideas too. It's basically there to keep the beat for the guitar that comes in, and then the vocals. And I had kind of explained what this section felt to me when I was doing the reaction there, is that it feels like if you've ever been to New York or a busy city, you get off the train or the subway, especially the subway, and before you've even left the terminal, you've probably found somebody who's just playing music and accepting tips or whatever you want to call it, just tossing some money in a hat or in their guitar case or whatever. Um, that's what this feels like. You get off the train and you hear all the hustle and bustle of the cars around you, and you're getting into the city proper, and you come across this corner musician, and you just stick around and listen to their tale. And like I said, it even has this lo-fi element, like it's recorded on a phone or a portable tape player, if those even exist anymore. And it just has this low quality aspect to it, which I actually completely forgot until just now, and it stands in stark contrast to the production put on everything after this moment. In fact, it even stands in contrast to the production at the moment, where the cars are crystal clear. And the rest of the atmospheric sounds of the city are crystal clear. And then you get this sort of lo-fi vocal work, lo-fi drumming, lo-fi guitar. It's an interesting idea because I don't know that many people, and like I said, even me at the time, picked up on the fact that a lot of the environmental stuff is a lot higher quality or a lot higher fidelity, I guess is what I want to say. The higher fidelity than the music itself. In retrospect, really keying in on this section of the song, there is this divide, almost like like when you see a video and it's green screen and you're like, oh, I can tell it's green screen. Like there's just not, the actors in the background just aren't meshing well, right? Maybe it's a lighting thing, but you can just tell that they're two separate things, and that's kind of the image I'm getting here now that I think back on it. Is there's this separation between the low fidelity audio of the music and the high fidelity audio of the environment, and maybe that was intentional. And like I said, I didn't even pick it up until after this part, and I went back and rethought about it. So it could very well be that most people don't even notice it, as I didn't notice it during the reaction. It sort of just fits. So, like I said, that's kind of the whole vibe of that opening. I'm really interested later when we get into the lyrics to find out what's going on here. I kind of mentioned that this could be the person getting off the public transportation and setting up shop and playing this music, or it could be somebody coming along and appreciating it and sticking around to hear what's going to happen. Hear how the rest of the song goes or whatever. As far as I remember, that is that entire section. We have a simple guitar line, simple drum line, and some indie rock vocals over top of it. And the indie rock vocals are interesting because in the second section, we don't have singing, but we have spoken word. And, well, I don't know. I was going to comment on the delivery, but it was in a language I don't know. And I actually don't know if the delivery was on, it was campy or if it was serious or tongue in cheek or what. But in the third movement, when we had our female vocals come in, that was very high quality, high fidelity. That person definitely seemed to be a practiced singer. Whereas our opening male vocal wasn't a bad vocalist at all. I don't want to come in here and just trash the dude. But definitely feels like either intentionally or unintentionally a little weaker in confidence would be my idea. And maybe that's intentional. We have somebody who's a corner musician. Maybe they aren't good enough to, um, be picked up by a label, and maybe this is one of the aspects where they are just feeling a little less comfortable about. I don't know. I don't know the story behind it. I don't know why this is, but I don't want it to be seen as a negative. We've listened to some really good indie rock with similar vocals that have emotionally moved me. I always bring up the microphones. I don't even remember what the song was called, but that track almost brought me to tears, and a lot of it had intonation aspects to it where our vocalist was singing off key or out of tune with the instruments around it, and it really adds to the charm of the style. There's also just a really raw element of the vocals, and some of those elements can be seen here. There's some choice notes that feels like the vocalist is picking a note out of key. This also happens in the guitar. We'll get to that in a second. There's some notes that the vocalist sings that feel just a bit out of tune, maybe a little flat or a little sharp. And there's just a lack of overall confidence to the performance. And I think that's the word I really want to use for this, is that it's a performance. I don't want to say that the vocalist can't sing, but the way that these vocals are being sung give me the visuals of somebody who is lacking the confidence, and maybe that is the vocalist themselves, or maybe it's the character they're playing for the song. It could go either way. Like I said, it could be intentional or unintentional, but either way, that's kind of the vibe that comes along. And again, it stands in stark contrast to our other vocal section that comes in movement 3, which is very well performed. There's a lot of confidence in our female vocalists' performance. So, going back to our movement 1, though, the last thing I want to talk about is these choice notes. We have a very extended guitar solo. Was it a guitar solo or a piano solo? I actually don't remember now. One of the two, though, for sure. And oh no, maybe it wasn't. I think I'm starting to get some of this mixed up, which is bound to happen, right? We're talking about a 20-minute song. I tried to jam into my head so I can pull back, reiterate later on. But I remember there was this elongated section. I don't remember what instrument was playing here. But there were a lot of really interesting notes that started to pull ideas from outside the key. It introduced dissonance into this track that, at least up to this point, was fairly consonant. I wouldn't say that our guitar and vocals were really doing much that clashed. Again, there were some intonation things and the rare note pulled from out of key, but for the most part, it was popish indie rock, really going for that vibe of consonant tones. And the guitar comes in and almost seems to meander a bit. And again, this could entirely be the purpose of it, because it is in stark contrast to some of the ideas that show up later that kind of do the opposite. It might be that this song is supposed to showcase the two drastically different the two drastically different sections of the track thematically through the music. Maybe these two characters are supposed to be represented this way, where one is a bit disheveled and meandering, and the other one is purposeful and confident. Right? Maybe that's the whole point of it. I don't know. I don't know the backstory to the track, but these are the themes I'm picking up in the music. Yeah, this solo kind of meanders for a little bit, though. For a long bit, I might say. There certainly was a point in it when I kind of felt that the melody was not really being justified anymore, and that the song should have progressed. And it was definitely around, I don't know, the halfway point. We were probably a good 30 or 40 bars into this solo, and I had felt that the solo had expressed the themes it was going for and was just kind of existing now, continuing to reiterate on some of the ideas already presented. Not really doing them in new ways or new flavors or new angles, just kind of regurgitating the ideas it's already been doing for such an extended period of time. Interestingly, we move out of this with environmental stuff. Once again, this is the environmental ideas are our transition concepts. They take us from our intro into our first movement. They take us between every movement, and it ends the song. It is the way that every musical idea gets pushed into the next musical idea. Now, movement 2, I really don't have a lot to say about because there's no music here. And like I said at the time, it's really gutsy to make a song and put in such an extended portion of it. We're probably talking a good, 4 or 5 minutes of this track, close to a quarter of it, full 25% of this song, music and audio, or music and singing. With neither of those, we just have atmospheric sounds, environmental sounds, and a conversation. Does it need music behind it? No. Yes. I can't answer that. Obviously, the composer decided no, it doesn't, and it's the composer's vision, it is their art, and I would say that that by itself states that it does not need music to it. Um, Adding music would be against the artist's vision for it, in which case it would be a different song. But subjectively, from my perspective, it needed something. Maybe music, maybe converting this from talking colloquial speech to singing. Have this argument through rhythmic and melodically layered vocals rather than speech styled vocals. Maybe it's entirely based on the language, as I had no idea what was going on since I think they switched to French, which I want to touch on in a second. Maybe being able to follow along with the story linguistically would have been that oomph that would have kept me interested here. But as it was, I had 5 minutes of nothing that I could latch on to. I didn't know what was going on with the lyrics. There was no music for me to listen to. I basically just heard what sounded like to my ears gibberish, because I don't know French, I think, and just sounds. I don't remember what the background sounds were at this point. It could have been more of the cars. Oh, it might have been the rain. Was it the rain? I don't remember. But just, I had atmosphere to listen to, noises that I can hear out my window. Um, And so, at least for my specific situation here, I just felt like I had nothing to listen to here, and I really wanted the next section to come up. So, at least in my case, I do think possibly something could have helped that. Maybe a melodic component for me to latch onto, even if it would have been a simple repetitive idea. Just have a piano arpeggiating or something. At least it would be something that I can get onto. Although, like I said, we always got to come at this from the creator's perspective as well, and maybe the purpose is to draw direct and immediate attention to the conversation, the argument. I think it was an argument. Again, like I said, I don't know French, so I don't know delivery, right? It kind of sounded aggressive to me at points. So it kind of sounds like an argument, but I'm also listening to it with inflections and intonations that an English speaker would use. So again, I'm not 100% on that. The male vocalist or the male speech guy, the male actor, sounded very calm throughout, but the female actor got more and more aggressive to my ears. And interestingly, the production married this as well by adding extra width over time, and eventually the last 2 or 3 lines that our female actress spoke were clipped. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it added this distortion on a couple of syllables as spoke too high, and the audio was destroyed a little bit, had a little bit of destruction put on it. Really interesting choice there. Now, before we get into movement 3 and 4, which I think is where the song, at least for me, really takes off and begins to explore some neat ideas, I have to talk about this oddity. The band is called, I forgot. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. There it is. Yes, so Kirayoshi. And it is presented in what I think is Japanese symbols. Kirayoshi, I only know that because their Bandcamp URL says Kirayoshi. And I'm kind of just assuming that because there's 4 symbols here and 4 syllables in that, so I'm putting the 2 together. But without that, I would not know what the band was actually called. So the band name is in, like I said, I think Japanese. Our opening vocals were in English, very clean English. Does not sound like somebody speaking outside of their native tongue. It sounds like a native English speaker, which, as we checked out in this week's live stream, that isn't always necessarily a thing, because we listened to First Aid Kit, I think it was, Swedish group, and they perfectly captured that Americana folk kind of vocals If I wasn't informed that it was a Swedish group beforehand, I would have sworn that it was actually a band from somewhere in the US. So obviously speaking outside of your native tongue doesn't always give away that you're speaking in a language that you weren't raised on, but at least here, I could be wrong, it feels like we have a native English speaker doing our opening lyrics. So we have Japanese and English so far, and then after this, we enter a French discussion, a French argument. I am so confused about everything regionally about this group. Um, I kind of want to know how all of this came together. Is it a global band? Because, we've seen a few of those. The most recent one I can think of is Slice the Cake, where a lot of the stuff is done over the internet. You record in your room or your recording studio, whatever you have, and you send it off to somebody, and then they record their bass, and maybe they're in like two countries over. And then you send it off to this other guy, maybe they're in another continent entirely, and they record the drums or whatever, and bam, you got a song. You guys never met in person, but you made music. It's one of the wonderful things about the internet. And I wonder if that's what's going on here. I don't know. I'm really curious about it now. Because there's just so many points of cultural aspects presented in here that it has me kind of confused about how it all comes together. So, anyways, yeah, that's kind of bonkers. Moving on to movement 3, our transition was rain into bugs, insects, right? And I had mentioned that, initially my brain kicked in and said, oh, nighttime, crickets. But also because I live on a swamp almost, it's really close to swamps. In fact, like, I'm pretty sure it is on a swamp. It's just a civilized swamp now. We put a city on top of it. But like 5, 6 minutes down the road, there is an attraction that is on a swamp. And when you get in there, it is just those kinds of insect noises and like 2000% humidity and lots of lots of water, but not like lakes or ponds, like swamps. And there's alligators there too. Like, I don't know. I'm pretty much on a swamp. I really am. So I hear these sounds occasionally just during the day. Um, but I think the majority of people are going to understand these insect sounds as being of the night, and it lines up with the album art, lines up with the title. So I'm kind of going to go that angle. And I think that so far we're listening to a story, not a song. And I'm going to try to remember to dive into that later. I don't want that to be understood as a derogatory thing, though. It's just a different way of creating a completely auditory experience. But I don't want to remove this from music. That's why I use the word song specifically. This is still musical. Music is a combination of sounds and silence and rhythmic and tonal configurations. That is how I define music. This is by definition musical. But at times it doesn't really feel like a song. It feels like an audio experience, and like I said, I want to touch on that later. So we have this atmospheric stuff, the bugs, the insects, their chirpings and whatever. Very much nighttime, I think, is the vibe they're going for. And then we have this really warm, bright tone. Like I said, I'm still not sure if it's a vibraphone or if it's a piano. But it comes in, plays a lick, and then just leaves space. And then plays the lick again and leaves space and plays the lick again. And after a while, this space begins to get filled with a bunch of other instruments. We hear full body chimes. We hear what I'm pretty sure is a xylophone. And there's a couple other of these pitched percussion instruments that come in, which makes me think we possibly were doing a vibraphone at the beginning, but I'm still not entirely sure. It sounds just a little too soft for that, which kind of makes me lean into the piano side. But anyways, we have this nice call and response with a bass idea, not like bass guitar, but like a foundational idea, bass idea. And then a response. and then our bass, and then a different response from a different voice, and then our bass, and then a different response from a different voice. And I really love this because it's this communal call and response. And I had mentioned that it's kind of like having a centerpiece. Well, all the little sounds kind of sound like stars to me, right? It's like the auditory representation of seeing stars out at night, especially once you get away from the lights in the city and you can actually see all of them, like as pictured here in the album art, a forest. So the base idea I kind of likened to the moon, right? It's always present, you always see it, but the stars all kind of twinkle and move. Um, and that's kind of the feeling I was getting from that. Um, Although I also kind of like this metaphor I just came up in my head, which is the fact that there's the call and response would be sort of, it doesn't really work. I was going to say that the moon shines because reflecting light from the sun. So we have this, the call would be the sunlight, and then the moon would be the response to send the light down. I don't know, it feels weird. I thought I was being clever, and like halfway through that, I was like, no, this is actually a dumb metaphor, Brian. I think I'm going to stick with the stars and the moon. I think that works really well, though. And this eventually leads way to a synthy sound. And it sort of reverberates and has a lot of tension in it. I don't want to necessarily say dissonance because I'm not sure if that's accurate, but there's a lot of waviness and chaotic element to it. And it resolves into this really warm sound. And I likened it to the old THX intro. And I'm still going to say that. That's the first thing I thought of. And it is this just very satisfying sound of all these noises and waves and stuff really coming together into a singular feel. I love that. And it's interesting that it comes right before the female vocals that we haven't heard at all before. So I don't know what's going on there, but the synth is definitely a bit of a, it's different, right? It's, so here's the thing. Our stars and the moon, they're all made with these things in the glockenspiel xylophone family. To me, they're all very earthly tones, if that makes sense. Some of them are very bright. A glockenspiel can get very bright and tinny, kind of the opposite of something earthy, like a marimba or a bassoon, if you really want to shift families there a little bit. But I think the idea is still that, to me, they feel very, they're celestial, but they're still home, right? But then this synth comes in, and to me, it's just very dissonant tone wise. It has this warble that's unnatural. And then it sort of resolves into this tone, which again is kind of unnatural for a single instrument. If you have a group of instruments, an orchestra, if you will, yeah, you can make this resolution into the singular tone come naturally from acoustic instruments, but otherwise it feels sort of otherworldly compared to the earthiness of our percussion instruments. Um, and I don't think that it's any coincidence that not long after this we hear her vocals, and like I already said, they're very well produced, they're very confident, very clear. I love them. This whole section stands in stark contrast to our first movement, which is very much about the hustle and bustle of the city. We have an unconfident vocalist. We have an electric guitar, proper drum kit, everything kind of leaning more towards a modern vibe, whereas this is uh, quieter, more natural, moving away from the hustle and bustle of the city, moving away from our electric guitars to these very earthy tones. Um, and then we have our very confident, powerful singer. It is exact contrast to movement one, and I can't say that that is a coincidence. I'm pretty sure that that was intentional. Um, where is I going here, though? Oh, yeah, not long after we have this vocal section, though, is when we introduce the synthesizer, which feels very out of place, assuming that this area is supposed to be staring at the stars when you're in the forest or something like that. So it makes me feel like there's this external element coming into the frame, which might be the female vocalist. Maybe she's the one walking through the forest, and this otherworldly entity comes in. I don't know what it is with supernatural things. That's where my brain always goes first. But yeah, it's an interesting choice given just how long we have had this very rooted, grounded sound, not just from our instruments, but also from our environmental tones. And then we have this spacey. And here's the thing too: is after the synth comes in, it warps and changes and modulates into something that kind of gives me like a space vibe. And a lot of this final movement of the track with this the synthesizer as our melody really gives me like space rock ideas. It really feels like we've been pulled off the earth and thrust into the stars and continue our journey through there, where at first we were just gazing upon the stars from the comforts of gravity and the grass under our toes and the trees around us, to being thrust into space and actually getting to see maybe where some of these stars are out there. Um, and that's kind of the overall vibe I get from this. It, at least to me, seems like these two unrelated stories. We have the city musician, the French argument, and then this actually feels cohesive. Walking through the forest, enjoying the starlight, something coming and grabbing us and taking us in. Oh, that sounds like alien abduction. I don't know. I say that out loud. It makes me less confident about this final part. Um, but yeah, it's just a really interesting combination of ideas, and I think that's kind of where I'm standing right now. Oh, there's also mm, going into the third movement. There's also the knob of like changing radio stations. Maybe everything's connected. Maybe the dude plays music at the corner and then he goes home and gets in an argument with his partner and then jumps in the car and like tries to find something interesting on the radio and doesn't, and drives to a forest and gets out, admires the stars, and something comes down and nabs him. In which case, is the something that comes down the female vocalist? Again, I don't know. Like, aside from the atmospheric ideas, there's so much disconnect between all of this, but I still think that movement 1 and 3 are connected through their disconnect. They are intentionally opposites. And maybe that's the point of it. Maybe that's why there is no music in movement 2, because this dude's life, he like really loves music. He's, starving artist kind of thing, right? Playing music on the corners. Um, but when he's at home, he feels not disenfranchised, disillusioned, right? And the music is stripped out of him. And then when he leaves, he tries to find music and can't. That's the radio stuff. And then the music begins to grow as he observes the forest and the stars, and then this otherworldly presence. Maybe it is our female vocalist. And that's where the music begins to swell and grow and change. And maybe it's this guy finding musical inspiration by getting out of the city and getting out of the stresses of his life. I don't know, man. I feel like I'm kind of grasping at straws here on this. Um, Dang, I remember there was something else I wanted to talk about. I don't remember what it was. I do want to say real quick though, the production here is solid. Assuming that every single thing in here is intentional, including our lo-fi movement 1 versus our higher fidelity movement 3, and movement 4 even. If that's true, then I really enjoy um, all the intentionality to it. And it's a really interesting choice. I don't know if you guys have gone over to Critical Compositions, my YouTube page where I put up all my music. You'll hear a lot of this same atmospheric stuff in that. I think atmosphere is a really great way to tell specific stories. Um, So I'm a really big fan of hearing more music with that in mind. So yeah, just and the way that it's not only just interwoven into the storytelling here, but also um, mixed in a way that it never really overtakes everything else. It's always pushed into the background without being lost or forgotten. And it's harder than it sounds. So a lot of props to the production side of this. The last thing I did want to talk about is song versus experience. As I said, this is music. This is musical. As I stated earlier with my definition, I would never strip this and say that it is not music. But is it a song? And I think I have a hard time saying yes to that, primarily because the melodic component is so sparse. In fact, it often feels like the melodic component is tertiary to our atmosphere, which is secondary to some of the vocal elements, which are primary. And 33% of our vocals here, a full third of the song, aren't musical at all. So I just have a tough time kind of putting it in that song area. What it feels like to me is a multimedia project where I only got half of the media. This feels, at least to me, like it. I don't know if I want to say requires visuals, because if I'm correct in my reading of the song, the composer and performers did a fantastic job at interpreting and injecting these storytelling ideas into the music in a way that I understood them. But if not, if my interpretation of this song, of how all these movements are connected and the tale that is being woven musically is not what the original composer intended, and I'm just way off on my interpretation of it, then, well, I mean, I'm flawed too, right? It could totally be me. But also, I think it would lend to the fact that the song would be, I don't want to say improved, it would benefit from having the visual component to go along with a lot of the audio components, because there's so many sections of this that aren't musical by tradition, right? The bugs chirping, the cars passing by, the rain, the argument. There's a lot of aspects in here that just, while they can be used and are used often here in a quasi musical manner, they are typically not used for music, they're used for audio design. In which case, like I said, kind of lends itself to having a visual component as well to help with the storytelling. So that's kind of where I'm at here. This sounds like a fantastic soundtrack concept to a musical multimedia project, but I don't know if I would straight up call it a song. But I don't know. Like I said, I could be a bit wrong there. Um, we're going to dive into the lyrics real quick. We're already pushing an hour, and we'll see where that takes us. All right, lyrics. Rain fills in the path flaws. Streets flow out whatever which way. Daylight hours shift by a people's petition from a city present and past future. The basket strains under emptiness, holding on fiercely to the chair, maintain a cycle unsustainable for fear of a slip into the deep. Okay, see, this is interesting because I had talked about the multiple cultural and language things going on between um, the some of the spoken languages in the track as well as the name of the band, and at least a lot of this feels like the writings of not a native speaker. There's some odd irregularities to some of these ideas, but I don't know if that really points directly to anything, because I have listened to some native speakers make some really odd lyrics before. So, it's entirely possible that this is still a native U.S. Or A native English speaker. We're just gonna go there. Um, Distant voices can still deafen, with echoes resonant and harsh, limping along after those painful missteps, and those scars, while faint, can still be discerned. The moon eye pierces through the vapors, constellations merge with the window lights, roads lead me onward toward the great beyond, yet a step bound eastward means 5 more westward. Huh. So that is all movement 1. And I honestly couldn't tell you what it means. There's definitely some elements in there I get. It says basket strains under emptiness, and that kind of, other than maintaining a cycle unsustainable, is there's definitely some stresses in this person's life that make whatever cycles they're in unmanageable. You know, they have to break out and do something different. They need a change in their life. But then there's also ideas that are a bit larger. Daylight hours shift by people's petition from a city present and a past future. It almost seems like some of these lines are about the individual, while other lines are about a societal thing going on. And I'm just not sure where to take any of this. But then we get into our final idea. It says, roads lead me onward toward the great beyond, yet a step bound eastward means 5 more westward. Almost feels like this person can see the path towards something larger, but can't find the means to walk the path. Interesting metaphor there. There's no lyrics here for the spoken word French conversation. Then we skip to the female vocal. Says, behold the lady of the moonlight, all hail the queen of the night sky sun. I illuminate the velvet firmament, and among the many stars I'm the only one. I see your heart's been in shadow for too long, and an ocean of sorrow in your eyes, so I'm reaching out and beckoning you to my chamber eclipsed by the skies. So that kind of leads into some of the ways that I was interpreting this, where we have a person who's disillusioned with life, and they venture out and try to find inspiration, and inspiration finds them as the Lady of the Moonlight, which might be this synthy, spacey entity that comes through musically, arrives and says, "Hey, I see that your life's not great. You're full of sorrow. You've your heart's been in the shadow. So I'm reaching out to you. Listen to my song." It's kind of the vibe I'm getting here. It says, I'm reaching out and beckoning you to my chamber eclipsed by the sky. So actually, that might be some of the "you're coming with me" kind of vibes, and bringing them into space. All right, maybe that's what the whole outro is about. Written by Derek Power. Okay, that's a very English name. Yeah, I think I have a pretty strong read on this then. In which case, these lyrics have sort of, I'm still not 100% sure, they sort of are representative of the music and the themes in the music and my interpretation of those themes. So I'd say this kind of fits together. I'd say my only big criticism of it would be the length. Some of it feels purposeful, like the meandering at the beginning, even though I think it went on for too long, ties into our lead characters meandering through life and being stuck in these cycles and not really feeling them anymore, right? Um, just, you wake up, you go do your thing, and you come back to your house and you get in an argument, then you go to bed, and then you repeat that, and it's just like at some point you got to say, something's got to change. And I think that loop, that cycle, that meandering is that extended solo that continues to reutilize old ideas that I think didn't really go anywhere and was kind of boring musically, and I wanted the song to progress, and that put me into the mind of our lead character. They're tired of their life, they're tired of the cycles, they're ready for the next step, and it just never happens. So musically, could probably be shorter. thematically, artistically, dead on. Put me into, told the story the way it's supposed to be told. Um, so yeah, like there's so much intentionality in here. Like I said, this Lady of the Moonlight is a very collected person, reaching out to this person who's sort of disheveled and disillusioned and done with the area they're in. Musically, stark contrast, but also the characters themselves are in stark contrast as well. Just a lot of intentionality in this. So I'm going to wager that even some of the criticisms I did have, if I did not return to them and be like, oh, actually, this kind of works, it probably was still done with an intention in mind through that lens, that it serves the purpose of the song thematically or narratively, more so than serving it musically, which is, I mean, for a song that is like, sorry about that. For a song like this that is designed to be, at least to me, story first, music second, it makes sense that a lot of the musical ideas and song ideas are going to be subservient to the story, not to the language of music, not to musical cohesion. There we go. That's what I wanted. So yeah, those are my thoughts on uh, Kirayoshi's The Night. Oh, you know what's interesting is over on Bandcamp, the titles are in French. I'm still kind of confused about the nationality of this group. um, those are my thoughts on Kirayoshi's The Night. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed that or not. Anything that stood out to you. Anything you'd like to expand upon or correct me on or anything like that. Let me know. When you're done with the comments, head into the description box and there's a link for Linktree. Takes you to this menu right here. You can pick up some merch, join the Patreon, join the Discord, follow me on Twitter, email me, a bunch of stuff. Go ahead and check it out. There's like 13 buttons there above the description box. If you could, like, subscribe, and ring that bell. I don't know. Feeling weird. Feeling kind of funny right now. Or silly. Not funny. Funny implies like an oddity. Feeling silly. Anyways, that wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We're going to check out our final beautiful song and we're going to look at a creator request. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.